Hello everyone, welcome to Story Vault YouTube channel. Hope you enjoy the video. Serious. What's your best story about listening to a gut feeling? Part 3. Story 1. This is my grandfather's story when he was in the Navy back in WW2. He was on ship at a base doing some grunt work. It's been years since me or my dad heard the story, so some details are lost. And all of a sudden he decided he needed to get off the ship. So he made his way off. I forget if he had to make an excuse or something. But not even 2 minutes after he got off, the ship explodes. An aerial attack hit the base. From the Japanese. My grandfather loved through Pearl Harbor purely because of a gut feeling. Thanks, Pop Pop. Comment. My great-uncle survived Pearl Harbor because he got shots leave the night before and got wasted and broke his leg. He woke up the next morning in the hospital across the harbor and watched as his ship was blown up. Story 2. Really didn't feel like going out for a drink after work with friends, but something told me to go. Met my husband that night in the bar. We've been married 24 years. Comments. I have a similar one though in a different way. In college I had an OkCupid account and was looking through women and passed this one that made me stop and chuckle a bit because she had a Grinch hat on in the picture. Well, I was looking at her profile and was going to send her a message but was interrupted and had to leave. Meanwhile, my laptop battery died and I lost the page or any reference of what her name was. No worries, I thought. I'll just search and look for her again. Grinch hat makes it easy. Well, that night I set to it, and for the life of me I couldn't find her. Looked through probably 600 people over a couple hours and couldn't find her. So I looked again and again. It was eating at me now. I didn't know why, but I just couldn't shake it. Well, about 3 hours after I started, I found her. It turns out that the search algorithm or something had made a mistake. She lived 125 miles away, and I was only ever looking at anything under 50. I almost wrote it off, thinking it was too far, but I had a gut feeling, so I just went ahead and sent her a message. We ended up agreeing to meet at a coffee shop and talk and ended up just chatting for 4.5 hours, and now 5 years later we're married. The algorithm didn't make a mistake. It knew exactly what it was doing. You two probably matched so well in other areas that it was programmed to disregard distance. My friends both have a similar story on the night they met each other. He was in grad school and she was a senior. He didn't want to go out to the younger college bars in town, but all his friends did, so he begrudgingly went. She wasn't feeling well, but it was her friend's birthday, so she begrudgingly went. They met that night and got married 3 years later. Not so much gut feelings, but outside factors that drug them out together at the same place on the same night. That ended very differently than I expected when I met my husband that night in the bar. Story 3. Didn't want to go to work one night. Didn't really like my job, but that was beside the point. I just had a feeling in the pit of my stomach. I went anyway, because money. Halfway through my shift, coworker says, "You smell something?" I thought was kidding, and that he'd farted. And then I smelled it, too, chemical burning, like printer toner or burning plastic. I looked at the space heater, which I'd always hated because it wasn't safe, plugged into the extension cord, plugged into a power strip, not a surge protector. And immediately I realized that the power strip was toast. Literally. There were sparks and a tendril of smoke emanating from the outlet containing the extension cord. I turned off the heater, unplugged it from the extension cord, and unplugged the power strip, which my coworkers had been content to leave as is. The power strip was charred in 2 places, meaning this had probably happened before. Their other power strip I found later had the same charring. Clearly, there are some intelligent people there. I probably stopped the gym, and possibly the strip mall it's in, from going up in flames. I quit 2 weeks later. Story 4. I woke up one morning with a deep sense of, be very careful today. Around mid-afternoon, I was stopped at a red light. One where you had zero sight of the direction left of the intersection. The light turned green. I felt the be very careful gloom again. I started to pull into the intersection very slowly, looking carefully in the direction I couldn't see from. It was now a good 5 seconds after the light changed. Horn behind me was blowing. When ZOMM, a semi came flying past the nose of my truck. How it didn't hit me I have no idea. Had to have missed me by literally a hair. After that, I didn't feel that gloom the rest of the day/night. Comments. I was behind a guy who was in the front of a left turn lane, with turn arrow stoplight. The turn arrow turned green, but he was fucking around with something and didn't get going for a few seconds. For whatever reason, I just sat and waited instead on honking. And he got hit by a fucking semi running the red light. But because he wasn't watching the light and got a late start, the semi only hit the very front of his car. If he had accelerated normally when the light changed, he would have gotten full-on T-boned and probably would have died. I had this happen, but I was the car behind the guy sitting at a green light. I was late for work, and I honked my horn when he didn't immediately move when it turned green. And after a couple seconds, a dump truck barreled through the red light going way over the 30 miles per hour speed limit. Had the guy in front started going through like normal, he would have made it fine, but I have no doubt in my mind I would have been T-boned. And I'm pretty sure my tiny Civic wouldn't have held up well to a speeding and maybe full dump truck. I wish I could thank that person for probably saving my life. Story 5. I've told this story before, but it was when my gut told me to not stop and help a woman in distress and to keep driving. She turned out to be a ploy for a group of people who attack people and steal cars from those who pull over to help. It's a creepy feeling. Comment. To note, if anyone comes up against this, you should drive away and report it to the police somewhere safe, so they can find out if that person needs help or if it's a trap, etc. Story 6. My friends were going out for New Year's, but something told me to stay home. My friends had a great time and kept messaging me throughout the night, and I felt bad for not joining them. I found out the next day that they decided to drive drunk to another party. They drove into a light pole at 60 miles per hour. Story 7. My grandma's gut instinct saved my mom's life, allowing me to be born eventually. When my mom was little, they were playing hide and seek. She took her little cat and hid inside an icebox. It's different than a fridge. It locked her inside, and it was airtight. My gram was inside the house cooking, and back then, unless someone's arm was hanging off and near death, the kids played without interference. My mom said the air was leaving. The cat had already passed out, and Mom said she knew she wasn't going to make it. My gram just knew. She went outside to get her, saved her and her cat, and took an axe to the icebox. Story 8. It was like someone was telling me to stand in my kitchen. I had everything I needed to leave for work, but this feeling of forgetting something was so strong I just stood there. After I checked for everything again, I took a step towards the door, and it was like someone was yelling at me to stop, so I stood for 10 more seconds. And then the feeling went away, like a gate was lifted and I could pass. Got in my car and did my normal drive. Hit some heavier than normal traffic before coming across a 5-car pileup. One car was turned 180, others were smashed, and everyone was standing around on their phones. Had I left like I wanted to, I would have been it. I knew it, too, and just said out loud, "Thank you." Comment. Something like that happened to me once. I'm a huge animal lover, and I will stop for any animal at all that needs help. One day I was driving to pick up my daughter from daycare, and I noticed an injured robin. I drove past it because I had the strongest urge not to stop. Well, I felt like a dick, turned around and got it. Picking him up and dropping him off made me 30 minutes later driving home from daycare. Some asshat was texting and driving and T-boned me, and then I T-boned a truck. The robin didn't make it through the night, and now I have crippling anxiety. I probably should have just left the robin. Probably. Story 9. A story about someone not listening to their gut feeling. My mom and dad went to Texas via train and then bus. They got to the bus station in Dallas after leaving the train station, and walking into the bus station my dad got a bad feeling. He stood outside the building, overwhelmed with this bad feeling. My mom asked what was wrong, and my dad said, "I don't know. Something doesn't feel right." He couldn't explain it any further than it being a feeling of impending doom. My mom laughed and told him he was being foolish. After a minute, he said okay and went into the bus station. My mom sat on a bench, and Dad went in to use the restroom. While he was taking a leak, a young guy jumped him and stabbed Dad repeatedly, a total of 27 times. He was trying to steal my dad's wallet. Dad fought him off as best he could. Finally, security heard the commotion, ran into the bathroom, and saved my dad. He almost died from his injuries, recovered, then had a massive heart attack about 6 months later. He survived the heart attack and lived another 16 years after that. Dad died in 2012 when he was 83. He was a tough old goat, and I miss him every day. Story 10. My mom had kept me home from school one day, but she still had to go to work, so she took me with her. We were about to stop at a gas station when I felt very sick and begged her to keep going. She still pulled into the gas station, and suddenly she felt sick and decided to go to a different station. We found out later that someone was shot while pumping gas at that station, maybe 5 minutes after we got out of Dodge. He was shot by a DC sniper. Story 11. I'm a CO. Something told me to do an early round. Found an inmate hanging herself, obviously attempting suicide. Because I did an extra round early, we were able to cut her down and get her to the ER. Had I waited, she would have died. Story 12. I was walking on the sidewalk of a busy street. As I approached a streetlight where there was also a trash can, I got this weird feeling and decided to veer my path away from the street and toward the shops. After I passed the trash can, a car jumped the curb and smashed into the streetlight/trash can. Can't explain it. Just felt like I needed to get away from that one area, and a moment after I moved, a car crashed there. I totally would have been hit by it had I not moved away. Story 13. I always had gut feelings that my GF was lying to me, but she'd make feel like I was the one who was lying. Turns out, my gut was right all along. Comment. Same. My ex would always accuse me of cheating and lying. Turns out he was the one doing both of those. Story 14. I'm a recovered drug addict and party girl. For 2 years of my life, almost every day was focused on going to parties and getting drunk and high. I would go to random parties and take random drugs just to achieve this. One Saturday, a good friend calls to invite me to a party at his brand new house. It was going to be a good party with a bunch of my friends and lots of substances to partake in. For some reason, though, my brain told me to sit this party out. It was probably the first Saturday in over a year that I had chosen to stay in. Woke up the next morning and found out that some of my friends, including the one who had invited me, had gotten into a huge fight. One of the guys pulled a gun out, chased the others through the house, and shot 2 guys. One in the stomach and one in the face. Literally dodged a bullet there. Comment. My sisters have a similar story. They were planning on going to a party on Father's Day but skipped out on that one, which was very unusual for them because they were teenage girls ready to go to parties at the drop of a hat. Well, at this party there was a drive-by shooting. People in the front yard were sprayed down. My sister's boyfriend was killed, and one of their good friends was shot through both legs. If they had been at the party, they would have most definitely been in the front yard with them, and there's a good possibility they would have been shot or killed too. I've never really thought about that. Story 15. I was 24 weeks pregnant with twins and had 3 Braxton Hicks contractions, fake contractions. With twins, I was allowed up to 8 an hour, but it didn't feel right, so I went to my doctor. Long story short, I was dilated, and if I hadn't gotten checked, I would have given birth at 24 weeks. Instead, they were able to hold the labor off another 4. Still early at 28 weeks, but 4 weeks better than 24. Story 16. I was driving home late on night and just minding my own business, hanging out in the center of 3 lanes on the highway doing maybe a few mph over the speed limit. Suddenly I just felt, almost heard, the strongest gut feeling I'd ever had that I needed to swerve over now. So I did, and not a second later did a huge black truck come absolutely flying through all 3 lanes, just missing me by feet. Would have nailed me if I'd have stayed where I was. Fucker didn't have his lights on, so I had no idea he was there. Strange addition to the story. I don't believe in God or prayer or anything like that at all. My mother, though, called me almost immediately after this happened. She said she woke up with an urgent feeling to pray for me right then. She asked if anything had happened. I told her about what had happened, and she started crying. Absolutely nuts. Comment. I had almost the same experience. I was driving through coal country, stupidly told GPS to avoid toll roads going from NC to Illinois. Sigh, that was heavily laden with big rigs and semis. Coming down a hill on a 55 mph road, there's a stoplight that's yellow. I have to brake pretty urgently so I don't run the light, but I stop in time without skidding, screeching, or anything. But as I'm slowing, I'm like, maybe I should pull over on the shoulder, since I did brake pretty suddenly. So I pull to the side a little as I stop, and it's a good thing I did. The semi behind me made no attempt to stop at all and barreled through the intersection, running the red light at full speed. Me and my sedan, I would have been completely obliterated. Story 17. I was out with my aunt, and this much older woman, maybe in her 90s, stopped us at the grocery store saying she was a psychic and she didn't usually stop people, but I needed to be much more careful when I'm on my own, and strongly suggested I need to carry pepper spray. When I asked why, and she said she knows I love to take walks and be by myself, but I'm too consumed in my thoughts or distracted by the beauty to recognize danger right away. I took this lightly and didn't really agree until I was at a reptile expo. My dad was in the bathroom, and I was walking around looking at snakes. I was holding this ball python when I felt breath on my neck and awkwardly moved over without looking over my shoulder, assuming somebody else wanted to look at the snakes. Then this woman aggressively shoved her way between me and this other person like she was ready to fight with him. She then told me it was a strange man who was following me around, and she had a really bad feeling about him. Being a mother, she kept her eye on me, and he had hovered over me an uncomfortable long time once I was alone. She was the second one who told me to watch my surroundings or carry pepper spray. So I thanked her and looked past her to see the man she was talking about. He did give off bad vibes. Really tall, long stringy hair, sunken eyes, scars on his face. That's two strangers with gut feelings about me, so guess who owns pepper spray now? Side note. I'm a really small 16-year-old girl, so I suppose I do appear pretty vulnerable. Story 18. My girlfriend, now wife, called me the night before September 11th, telling me she had the strangest feeling that something terrible was about to happen. She had never said anything like previously, nor since. The odd thing was that when she called at that moment, I was holding the engagement ring I had purchased for her earlier that day. So you can imagine what was going through my head as she told me about her gut feeling. Comments. I've never told anyone this because I don't think anyone would believe me. But a month before Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast, I lived there at the time. I kept having a feeling that something big and bad was coming. I couldn't pinpoint it. It was just a feeling of doom, gloom, and disaster. After Katrina, the feeling went away. My parents had booked a 2-week stay at a beachfront hotel in Biloxi. About 2 weeks before they were to leave, my mom started to say she didn't want to go, but of course, since it was booked, my dad didn't want to cancel. The day before their flight, she told him again that she didn't want to go, but he said too bad, he was going without her then, so she agreed to go. The day of their flight, as they were getting ready to leave the house, Mom sat down on top of her bag and said she was not going. Dad was furious, so angry, but he decided to stay at home with her. Good thing too, because what would have been the 6th day of their vacation, Hurricane Katrina hit, and their hotel was reduced to matchsticks. Dad stopped complaining after that. So, that's the end of the video. Hit the like button and subscribe. Have a good day and see you in the next video.